right, welcome to Digging for Truth, where we explore the reliability and the authority of the Bible. I'm your host, Henry Smith. Today, we welcome back ABR staff member and archaeologist Bryan Windle to do his annual Top 10 Discoveries from this past year. Bryan, good to have you on the show again.
Hey, thanks, Henry. It's great to be back. Another top 10 list looking back at the year in biblical archaeology. It's going to be exciting.
All right. Well, for those who are familiar with the top 10 countdown, they know we've got to go fast and furious, Bryan. So let's jump into it. Let's talk about criteria first before we start hitting the list.
Yeah. So every year I look at about 200 news stories in biblical archaeology, and then from those I select the top ones for a weekly breaking news update that we do on our website at ABR, which is BibleArchaeology.org. Just look for the breaking news tab. And then at the end of each year, I take a look through and I choose the 10, what I feel are the 10 most significant discoveries of the year. And so here are my criteria, because there are a bunch of us who do these lists, and sometimes there are some differences, and usually that's related to the criteria. So number one, in order to make my list, it has to be directly related to the people, places, or events in Scripture. So that's the number one criteria. Number two is that it has to be a discovery or a new study about a discovery as opposed to an announcement. So for example, in October, the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities announced that the tomb of Amenhotep III was going to be reopened to the public for the first time after a 20-year restoration project. And that was pretty big news. Amenhotep III, many of us believe that he is the pharaoh who was ruling during the period of the Exodus. So important, but it was just an announcement, not a discovery, so it doesn't make my list. And number three, I only consider discoveries that or studies that have been publicized through an official announcement by a Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, or from a licensed archaeological dig with the understanding that there is going to be some sort of a peer-reviewed article that follows. And so those are my three criteria for choosing the top 10.
That sounds good. Number 10 then, what is it? Tell us about it.
All right, number 10 is the ancient necropolis that was unearthed at Collosae. So the very first ever systematic excavations at Collosae began this past year in 2025, and that's huge. And the team leading the dig announced that they had discovered a necropolis at the site. 60 intact rock-cut bathtub tombs were unearthed. Each one's about 5 foot 11 inches long and about 4 foot 11 inches deep. And inside the tombs, they discovered a number of grave goods, clay vessels, glass bottles, oil lamps, coins, personal items like sandals. And so preliminary evidence suggests that these tombs are about 2,200 years old. And so this discovery is going to be important. It's going to shed a whole lot of light on what life was like for the ancient Colossians. And of course, Colossae is important to those of us who study the Bible because the Apostle Paul wrote a letter to the church that was at Colossae. It was a church likely founded by Epaphras. We read about that in Colossians chapter 1, verse 7. So that was my choice for number 10.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing in the future what relationship between the archaeology and the letter of Paul's letter exists. And there was an earthquake that happened there in the early 60s. A lot of great stuff, hopefully down the road. Okay, now you have number 9 is the tomb of Thutmoses II. This is really fascinating. Tell us why that's important.
Yeah, so the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities confirmed that the tomb it was actually discovered in the autumn of 2022, is indeed the tomb that belongs to Thutmoses II. This was the last missing tomb of an 18th dynasty pharaoh. And for those of us who study biblical chronology, the 18th dynasty is hugely important because that's the era of the Exodus and the conquest in that period of time. And so this was the first royal tomb discovered in Egypt in over 100 years. The last one was in 1922 when they discovered the tomb of King Tut, Tutankhamun. And so the tomb itself is in relatively poor condition. There was flooding in the past, and they had found a few key indicators that maybe it was a royal tomb, but nothing really conclusive until this past year. They were able to discover the remains of blue painted plaster with gold stars, which are typical of a lot of royal tombs. They also found the remains of an inscription on the wall from the Amduit, which is a religious text known from other royal tombs. But during the most recent excavations, they actually unearthed fragments of an alabaster vessel that was inscribed with the name Thutmoses II beside that of Queen Hatshepsut with the words, "the deceased king." And so they've confirmed that this is indeed the tomb of Thutmoses II. Now, Thutmoses II is famous for marrying his half-sister Hatshepsut, who some scholars believe is the daughter of Pharaoh who pulled Moses from the Nile River. We don't know that for sure, but she's a good candidate for that. That's found in Exodus 2, verse 5. So the tomb of Thutmoses II was a big discovery in Egypt, and that's my choice for number 9.
Yeah, they've combed Egypt for just about everything, but stuff keeps coming up. This is an interesting discovery, especially the connection with Hatshepsut. Fascinating stuff, Brian. Okay, the next one is number 8, is a Moabite inscription. This is interesting because this slipped my mind. I know you reported on this, and when I read through, I was like, oh, that's right, I forgot about that. So tell us about this inscription found at Jericho.
Yeah, so I have an affinity for Jericho, and so when this came up, that was an important find. Lorenzo Negro, the dig director at Tell Sultan, which is Old Testament Jericho, recently published his interim report on the excavations from 2019 to 2023. So a 5-year interim report, and one of the important discoveries that was highlighted in it was an ostracon. Now, an ostracon is a piece of pottery, a pottery sherd with an inscription on it, and in this case, it had a Moabite inscription containing what he says is a dialect that is the same or similar to that on the famous Mesha stela, the Moabite stone, the Mesha inscription. So the ostracon was found on the summit of the tell in an area near where the Middle Bronze Age temple once stood, although the inscription itself dates to a later period. It dates to the Iron Age, about 960 to 840, what we would call the Iron Age 2A period, and that has led the excavators to conclude that Jericho was likely under Moabite control at that time. Now, the Bible notes that Jericho was under Moabite control at an earlier period of time in the 13th or 12th century, depending on when you put the period of the Judges with Eglon. We read about that in Judges chapter 3. And so we see it seems that it was under Moabite control at a later date period. And that just shows us that when the Bible talks about the Moabites controlling Jericho, they did at certain times in history. So that was my choice for number 8.
Yeah, really important because we don't find many inscriptions in Israel. Like a lot of what we have as far as writing, tablets, all that, Mesopotamia, Ugarit, the Mari archive, those kind of things. So when we find something in Israel, especially a place like Jericho, it's really exciting. And we should say that you've got another inscription coming up later, Brian, so people should stay tuned for that. And we're going to go to a break right now. We'll be right back as we do the top 10 countdown from 2025 archaeological discoveries. We'll be right back.
Digging for Truth is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different.
Hi, welcome back to Digging for Truth. We're doing the top 10 discoveries of the year 2025, with Bryan Windle. Okay, Bryan, we are now on number 7. This one has to do with the city of David. Tell us about it.
Sure. My choice for number 7 was a structure on the eastern slope of the city of David that was identified as a place of worship. And so the authors of a recent article that was in the journal Attica interpret this structure on the eastern slope of the city of David as in Jerusalem as a place of worship that was in use from the Middle Bronze Age through to the mid-8th century BC. And the excavations were actually carried out way back in 2011, but they've just published the results this past January. And so the structure consists of a number of rock-hewn rooms. There are 8 of them. And there are things within these different rooms that are associated with worship. So for example, in one room they found a standing stone, a part of a masaba still in situ there. In another room, they found, room 5, they found a chamber with what they're calling a favisa. Favisa, we're familiar with at Shiloh because we have one there, is a place where they would bury their cultic objects, their cultic debris after they had worshipped. So they found things like scarabs and bullae and restorable vessels and figurines, animal bones in this particular room. And room 5 had these mysterious V-shaped grooves in the ground, in the floor. We're not quite sure what those were for. Some have suggested maybe for holding tables or channels for blood or whatever it is with the sacrifices. We're just not sure. An oil press was discovered near the structure too, and ABR archaeologist, our excavation dig director, Scott Stripling, has looked at these findings, and he believes that this may have been the location where King David set up the tabernacle to house the Ark of the Covenant. And so these rock-hewn rooms had walls, but they had no roof, and so you could have put a tent over top of them. And the Bible indicates that David set up the tabernacle, a little tent, just above the Gihon Spring, and that is where this structure is located. So the details in 2 Samuel chapter 6 and 1 Kings chapter 1, 38 to 39 seem to align with this particular structure. So that was my choice for number 7, and my choice for number 6 was excavations that were done at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where they discovered traces of an ancient garden. So La Sapienza University professor Francesca Romana Stassola, who is overseeing the excavations, they are renovating some of the top floor tiles, which when they pull them up gives them an opportunity to excavate under these floor tiles. And what they discovered is that they discovered the remains of olive trees and grapevines that were identified through archaeobotanical analysis, including pollen residue beneath these floor tiles. And they believe they come from a strata that is pre-Christian. And so that's important. What that tells us is that this particular area likely was a garden before a church ever went up. And that's important because in John chapter 19, we read that the place where Jesus was buried had a garden. Now, in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid. This is just another small piece of evidence that is in favor of this location being the actual final resting place of Jesus. At least it's the one that has the best attested archaeological and historical evidence, and yet another little piece with this.
Yeah, the importance of multidisciplinary scientific work with archaeology, including archaeobotanical analysis. We do that at Shiloh as well. And here,
Yep.
you know, this is part of it. If you're not meticulous, you could miss really important evidence that this is so important and such an intriguing connection. Fascinating stuff, Brian. Okay, but we're going to move to number 5 now. This one has to do with the Temple Mount Sifting Project. Tell us about number 5.
Well, number 5 is a bulla that was inscribed with a biblical name that was discovered in Sifting by the Temple Mount Sifting Project. Now, just for our listeners to remind them, a bulla is a clay seal impression. And so this particular bulla was dated paleographically based on the writing to the 7th or 6th century BC, and it reads, belonging to Yediah, son of Asayahu. Now, a man named Asayahu, who served King Josiah, is mentioned in a couple of places in the Bible, in 2 Kings 22:12 and in 2 Chronicles 34:20. And so the name on the bulla is the same as the name of this person in the Bible, although it appears in its longer form. So the shorter form you might see in your Bibles is Asaiah, and the longer form Asayahu were interchangeable at that time in antiquity. And so this name, by the way, is known from another bulla that was found on the antiquities market some 20 years ago, and it actually has the inscription "Servant of the King" on it, but because it's from the antiquities market, its authenticity is suspect. But this one found in the Temple Mount Sifting Project was actually found in an archaeological context, although albeit a disturbed one, because that's the material that they are excavating. What we can say is that this name that is used in the Bible at a particular point in history, we now have archaeological evidence that that name was actually used at that point in history. And it may be the same person. We can't stretch the evidence that far. We can say that name was used at that point in history. So that was my choice for number 5.
Yeah, those little teeny details sometimes in the biblical text, they're part of the story that God is unfolding, and then remarkably we find things in the archaeological record consistent with it. It's always amazing. The amount of stuff we have from the divided kingdom period is just overwhelmingly historical. You know, it's great stuff. Okay, but we're going to now move to one of the really most interesting archaeological sites in Israel, and that is Megiddo. Brian, tell us about number 4 and its relationship to Megiddo.
Yeah, so number 4, for the very first time, they found evidence of an Egyptian army at Megiddo that dates to the time when the Egyptian army defeated King Josiah. And so archaeologists working at Megiddo recently announced that they had found this assemblage of Egyptian pottery and Greek pottery that dates to the 7th century BC. And they associate that with the army of Pharaoh Necho, who was occupying the area at that particular time, and who defeated King Josiah in 609 BC. We read about that in 2 Kings 23, verses 29 to 30. And so the Egyptian pottery is crudely made, it's poorly fired, and was likely used for supplies for Necho's army. The Greek pottery likely was used by the Greek mercenaries whom Necho had hired. And so this assemblage was discovered in excavations between 2016 and 2022, and this new area never before excavated at Megiddo. They call it Area X. I guess X marks the spot in this particular case, and it is the largest Egyptian assemblage ever discovered in the southern Levant from that particular time period. So that's hugely important, and they concluded that the best explanation is that this combination of pottery matches that what we know about history, where Necho came to Megiddo and likely hired some Greek mercenaries. Actually, in the book of Jeremiah, it seems to indicate that Greek troops from Lydia were fought alongside Pharaoh Necho in Jeremiah 46:9. So this all kind of matches up what we see in the biblical text from this particular period of history, and now we've got some archaeological evidence to go along with it.
Fantastic, Brian. Well, we're rolling right along here. I want to flash back to the David's Tabernacle. We did a whole episode with Dr. Stripling on that, episode 155. We refer our viewers back to that so they can check out more details about that. But we got to go to a break, Brian, and then we're going to come back with the top 3, and we'll be back right after this message. Are you interested in digging even deeper for the truth? Then please visit the ABR website at BibleArchaeology.org and click on Bookstore. There you'll find a wide variety of resources designed to defend the Christian faith. Archaeology, apologetics, the text of Scripture, creation evolution, even study Bibles. You can pick up the perfect gift for the sincere seeker or fellow Christian. Visit Bible Archaeology and click on Bookstore today. Hi, welcome back to Digging for Truth. We're counting down the top 10 discoveries of 2025 with my friend and archaeologist Bryan Windle. Okay, Brian, now we're cracking the top 3. So number 3 has to do with the Dead Sea Scrolls, one of our favorite subjects. This is such an interesting, not discovery, but new analysis. Tell us about it.
Yeah, and let me just state, first of all, once we get to the top 3, these 3 are, in my view, so significant. I could have gone either way. Any one of these could be number 1, is what I'm saying. But number 3 is this new study that proposes an earlier date for some of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So according to a study that was in the journal Plus One in June of 2025, a third of the Dead Sea Scroll manuscripts that were tested seemed to be composed earlier than it was originally thought. And so the research team created an artificial intelligence program, which they called Enoch, and they trained it to predict the dates based on handwriting styles and features in the manuscript and carbon-14 results. And these dates were then compared to the dates that had previously been assigned to the Dead Sea Scrolls. And what they found, they tested 30 of them, and 26 of them had valid results. And of those 26, 9 of them seem to date earlier than the dates that have been traditionally associated with those particular manuscripts. And those include really important manuscripts like 4Q12, which is a manuscript of Genesis, 4Q2, 4Q27, a manuscript of Numbers, 4Q30, Deuteronomy. But the one that really is interesting to me is manuscript 4Q114, all of these found in Cave 4. And it's a manuscript of Daniel, which dates to 230 to 160 BC. Now that's hugely important because some scholars had suggested that Daniel was not written by Daniel, was not written at the time that it purports to have been written, but was written much later, around 160 BC, the time of the Maccabean revolt. Now, but you have a manuscript now that is dating earlier than that, and then you have to precede that because it takes time for it to be copied, to be circulated, and to be accepted as canonical by the people at Qumran. And so this was hugely important, this study, to show that many of the manuscripts are actually earlier than we previously thought they were.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see more studies of that to see if this study gets authenticated further or if somebody puts out a counter argument. And the other thing it reminds us, the Dead Sea Scrolls, I don't think we're ever going to stop learning from them because of new technology and new analysis, and that's the beauty of modern technology with archaeology. Okay, but now we're going to move to Jerusalem, Brian. We're down at the Dead Sea. Now we're going to move up to Jerusalem for number 2.
Yeah, number 2 was the discovery of a huge dam wall from the time of King Joash that was unearthed at the Pool of Siloam. Now, we've been waiting for results from the excavations at the Pool of Siloam for some time. We've been all excited about it, waiting for this. It's a story I've been following for a couple of years now, a few years. And they recently published their long-awaited findings, and they discovered this monumental dam wall dating sometime between 805 BC and 795 BC during the reign of King Joash, or Jehoash. He goes by both names, the king of Judah. 69 feet section of wall, once stood 40 feet high, more than 26 feet wide. So just a massive structure. And it was dated using carbon-14 on a couple of pieces of uncharred straw and some charred twigs that were embedded in the wall. And that's where we get the date from on that particular thing. Now, what's interesting is that the authors of the study also cited recent analysis dating the Gihon Spring fortifications to that same period. They also cite climate data from the Dead Sea area with core samples and stalagmites that seem to indicate that at that period of antiquity, it was a period of aridity followed by flash floods. And so what it seems is that King Joash, or maybe his successor Amaziah, built this as a solution to the unpredictable weather so that they could collect and keep the water, both from the rainwater and water that was brought in by Channel 2 in that particular pool. And so what's interesting is that the Bible does note that King Joash engaged in massive building endeavors such as renovations to the temple. We see that in 2 Kings chapter 11, chapter 12. All of these things are just really important that we see this in Scripture, and now we're starting to see some evidence of that dates to that time period.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. It's always, sometimes we got to wait a long time for these reports to come out, but they're well worth it when they finally do. All right, Brian, well, we're going to stay in Jerusalem for our number 1 discovery, something that's extremely rare in Israel, and I alluded to it earlier. Please tell us about your number 1 discovery for 2025.
Yeah, this news came out in October 2025, and it was huge. As soon as I read it, I said, okay, that's going to be near the top of everybody's top 10 list. This is a fragment of an Assyrian cuneiform inscription. And so the Israel Antiquities Authority announced this discovery. It was discovered in Jerusalem. The cuneiform is in the Akkadian language, and it's believed to be a request from the king of Assyria to the king of Judah for tribute. And this is the first Assyrian inscription of substance from the First Temple period yet discovered in Jerusalem. Not the first one period. There have been other partial tablets that are hard to read and little lines here and there, but this is the first one of substance. It's only about 1 inch in size. It's about 2,700 years old, and petrographic analysis shows that the sherd that it's on, the clay, actually comes from the Tigris River basin over in Mesopotamia. So that matches what we would expect from a potsherd with an inscription from the Assyrian king. And one expert summarized the inscription this way: it seems to be addressing a delay in payment of tribute. And one expert said, we have a direct letter signed with the seal of the king of Assyria addressed to the king of Judah, saying to him, "Dear king of Judah, send the tribute quickly by the 1st of Av, and if not, the consequences will be severe." Now, do we have any description in the Bible that seems to match that? Yes, we do. We're told that Hezekiah rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. That means he did not pay his tribute. He withheld the tribute. And that's in 2 Kings 18:7. And so that is a good candidate for the historical situation that this may be addressing. Now, it may be another king of Judah. Maybe it was his son Manasseh who later in his life came back to the Lord. And it could be any, but we have, really interesting, we have a biblical description of a king of Judah rebelling and withholding tribute from the king of Assyria, and then we have this potsherd with an Assyrian inscription that seems to be addressing. And I always say, isn't it interesting? We have a description of the Bible, and now we have a similar description from archaeology.
Yeah, you know, when the Assyrians say the consequences will be severe, we really know what that means. That means like people are going to be put to death. It was no small matter. An unbelievable discovery. Okay, Brian, you got about 45 seconds to tell us, just give us a final summary of all this and where people can check out these stories as the year unfolds in 2026.
Sure. Well, I mean, I find top 10 lists fun. Part of my joy in putting this list together is that I get to compare it with other top 10 lists. Gordon Govier writes a great top 10 list for Christianity Today. Todd Boland writes a list of the top discoveries for his website, BiblePlaces.com. And so it's fun for me to compare and see where mine match up or are different than theirs. But it's more than that. This list contains very significant finds in biblical archaeology that both affirm and illuminate details in the Bible. And so while these are the most significant finds, these 10, there are hundreds and hundreds of discoveries that are made every year in Israel. And I just think of our excavations at Shiloh, the number of discoveries we make, whether it's pottery or whether it's bones that we date or whether it's another piece of gold from the Favisa or something else from the city gate or from the monumental structure. We have so many that continually help us understand the biblical world better. But these 10 are hugely significant, and I believe that they demonstrate, these 10, and in addition to all the ones that have been made for the last 150 years, really do demonstrate that the Bible is historically reliable. And I think that's good news because it contains the good news that God sent his son Jesus to seek and save the lost.
Amen to that, Brian. Well, thanks for all the great work for that, and we look forward to new discoveries in 2026. Friends, thank you for watching Digging for Truth.